that is a a variable need right now, and so if you want to bump that to get into
let's move it to the end, and if we have time,
Absolutely.
we'll address it, and if we don't, that'd be okay.
Yes, sir.
All right, very good.
You
So
betcha.
with that said, I do want to let council be aware we had some issues at the public library this last weekend. Somebody posing as a council member went in there raising a whole lot of hell, and they looked at pictures of every one of us, so it was none of us. But they have a podcast room that has an open where there's no windows for ventilation reasons, and there was some profanity going on during the podcast. Somebody went up to complain, then this person steps forward and said, I'm a council member, I'll pull your 1 cent funding, I'm going to do this and that, and I'm like, I can't imagine one of our council people doing that, but I showed her pictures of every one of us. It was none of us, thankfully. So just know that if you get any backlash or feedback from that, it was none of us doing such a thing. So with that said, let's move on to the MRG request.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. It's good to be with you tonight. The MRG request, this is the what we call the minimum revenue guarantee that is being posited as a request by the Casper Alliance, as well as the airport board, and we have a number of those representatives here tonight to walk us through the factual basis behind what this program is all about, what it is that is actually being requested of the council, and how it works with respect to supporting or not supporting the continued service up at the airport. And so my hope is that you'll feel very comfortable asking questions. This can be a rather complicated, concept, as it were. And certainly I do think that understanding what it is that is needed of the council is exactly why we're here tonight. We, as I mentioned, we have a number of representatives here to entertain any questions that you might have. But as I understand it, we do not need a definitive yes or no this evening. And so this could be just simply an information gathering nexus for the council, or if indeed council's ready to render a decision tonight, that certainly can be done too. But the pressure is not on as it relates to making sure we have a hard yes or a hard no. And so with that, Mr. Mayor, if I could turn the time over to Kermit.
Kermit, yeah, absolutely. Just please keep in mind, this is a very complex issue with two very different sides, which you're going to hear both up tonight. So I would prefer that we do not make a decision tonight. I would prefer that we let it soak in and have some more discussions on this before we decide to move on it. With that said, Kermit, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you all for the opportunity to present. We know this is a complex issue. We're going to try to stay on point. So I just want to do introductions real quick. Glenn Januska is the director of the airport. Casey Wida, Fly Casper Alliance. Justin Farley is the president of Advanced Casper. I'm Kermit Willie. I'm the president of First State Bank. I am on the airport board and have been for a long time. I'm also on the Advanced Casper board and on the City Finance Steering Ad Hoc Committee. Luke Gilliam from the Visitor Center is also here. And so we will all field questions. Hi, Tasman. Hi. Tasman's here representing McMurray Foundation. You have our letter requesting a participation in the MRG, minimum revenue guarantee for the Delta flight between Casper and Salt Lake. It's $50,000 out of a total $800,000+ that has already been approved by the County Commission and the Wyoming Aeronautics Commission. So the funding is there. We have secured the whole thing. What we're asking for is participation to show broad-based community support for this. Glenn will describe the MRGs and history and how they work. Just so you know, as an airport board member, we are appointed by the County Commission, and we serve at their bequest, I guess. It's a very complex organization. We have about $5 million in revenue a year, around $70 million in assets that we manage. And as a board member, we just help in the steering direction of how the airport works. We also approve contracts and major things like this. And we hire the airport director. We were given the opportunity to actually do the MRG, and I say the opportunity to give money away, but it's to keep the flight here in Casper. And we were given that opportunity because we'd established about a 20-year relationship with SkyWest. A lot of other airports just got notice when their flight schedule didn't show up, and that's how they learned that they were no longer being served by Delta. So I believe that we are fortunate for this opportunity. And that's about it. So, Glenn?
Thank you, Kermit. I have two things that I could pass out to you. I'm going to keep one of them here. So, Mr. Mayor, council members, thank you for this opportunity, as Kermit said, to talk about, again, something that's very important, I think, to our community, but something that's also relatively complex. So, a little bit about what the minimum revenue guarantee is, the background. It's relatively new to us in Casper, but it's not something that's new to the state. This is actually something that other airports, the other commercial service airports in the state have been doing for a while. We've been fortunate to not have to look at doing something with this since before November 2021. And then a little bit about what's going to be happening going forward, particularly whether or not we have the support for the minimum revenue guarantee going forward. So basically what happened is we have 9 commercial service airports in the state. Casper was the only commercial service airport up until November of 2021 that did not have some type of a financial support for the programs. There's federal essential air service programs, there's state programs. Jackson Hole Airport takes advantage of the state programs, plus a lot of their business community supports their air service development, but everybody had some level of community support, state support, business support for the air service. It's something that's necessary for particularly smaller communities and communities that have big streets, diverse, large states. So this was something that we did not have. Our service going in and out of Casper, both on United and Delta, was self-sufficient, and we didn't have to look at this. Before COVID, we were starting to see a pilot shortage, and if you read the newspapers, you probably have read about pilot shortage issues. So everything was really booming. We were looking at trying to be able to hire enough pilots. Then COVID happened, and the airlines, obviously air traffic was decimated. The airlines laid off a lot of their pilots or offered early retirement. And then service came back. The demand came back, particularly for the leisure passengers right after that time period. And the airlines had trouble then. We're back to the same pilot shortage issue, having laid off a lot of pilots and offered early retirement for a lot of the pilots. So we're back to the pilot issue. So as we're getting into this point, the economy is starting to pick back up again. Fuel prices are relatively high. SkyWest said to us, as Kermit said, would you guys consider a minimum revenue guarantee, because we are not going to want to continue to serve markets that are marginally profitable or may not be profitable. So really, we had about 2 months to be able to look at putting something in place before November. And knowing again at this point that if we did not go forward with this, we would probably lose the Delta service. And really, with the exception of Allegiant and Spirit and some other carriers, if you're looking at mainline carriers, it's United, Delta, and American. So we'd have the United service, we'd potentially look at losing the Delta service. So we in essence said we would put this in place, and we did. We worked with the county commission. The state aeronautics department has a program where they pay 40% of the cost, and it was roughly $755,000. So it was going to cover us from November 1st through the April 2022 timeframe. And the service did a lot better. One of the perceptions I think that we had, even the county commissioners had, is once you sign the agreement with the airlines, you might as well just write them a check, because they're going to figure out a way to get all the money. And that wasn't true. Out of the $755,000 loss, projected loss, it was only about $56,000. So service was a lot better. And at that point, had we lost the service, and we are going to try to get the service back sometime in the future, the perception is this is a market that's going to lose money. We showed them that this is a market that actually did better. So we started looking at this. We looked at another minimum revenue guarantee. That's a time period in this one sheet that takes you from May through the end of the year for 2022. It was a smaller request. It did better than it was anticipated. We got to November and December. They actually talked to us about putting a second flight in place. So we got through that time period. The one thing that was really starting to change the market is that pilot shortage. It used to be that the SkyWest Airlines, the regional carriers, SkyWest, GoJet, Transstate, that fly the regional jets on behalf of United, Delta, and American, would train pilots, and then as they would get their hours, they would move up and they would take a job with United and Delta and American, Southwest. There was such a demand for pilots that United and all the major carriers started putting their own pilot training programs in place. The military are offering basically re-signing bonuses for the pilots. So even the military is having problems getting pilots. So the pilots are not coming from the military. The major carriers are hiring pilots quickly, and the SkyWests don't have the pilots. So they raised wages, which is good, except it meant that a 50-passenger airplane that's not very fuel efficient is now being flown by a flight crew that's costing more money. And structurally, it's more expensive to be able to fly those 50-passenger airplanes. It's just not Casper, it's anywhere. So as we started to talk to SkyWest, it said we need to look at something that's going to be long-term. The 50 passengers, the pilots, where the pilots are in demand, it's going to be difficult to continue to look at those 50 passengers. So we said we need to look at a larger airplane. And because of another reason, what would take me another 15 or 20 minutes to explain that you really don't want to hear, that couldn't happen until July of this year. So we are basically looking at continuing this service, and keeping the service in place. We are looking at for a larger airplane. SkyWest has already said that they're bringing in a CRJ 700 or 900, which is a 70 or 90 passenger airplane, starting in July of this year. That's going to be important for us because not only is it more seats in our market, which is good for the consumer, but those additional seats in the market means a pilot that flies a 70 or 90 passenger airplane is going to be better than a pilot who flies a 50 passenger. So the markets that have the smaller jets are going to be more susceptible to losing their service. So what does this mean going forward? There's an article that you have in front of you that was from April 5th, so not very long ago, that talks about that American Delta and United have collectively dropped 74 U.S. airports since the beginning of the pandemic. This is the reality. The reality is the airlines are looking at stopping service in markets that are not profitable. They're looking at pulling out of service in markets that have the 50-passenger airplanes, not because the 50-passenger airplanes are not available. It's if you have a pilot that can fly a 50-passenger or 70-passenger or 90-passenger airplane, you're going to put that pilot in the ones that have the bigger capacity. So we're actually in a better position moving into larger airplanes. We're seeing larger airplanes with United starting in next month. So we're in a better position. We're just trying to basically get to the point that we can get to those larger airplanes. This, again, as I said, is not something that's unique to Casper. We've been fortunate to not need this up until November last year. The rest of the commercial air service airports have been taking advantage of this for a number of years. In fact, Gillette, just as an example, since 2005, the state has funded just shy of $8 million for their service. So we don't want to be in that position where we're looking at that on an ongoing basis. We're looking at this and working with our air carrier partners to grow into larger airplanes. The larger airplanes actually cost more to operate, but a 50-passenger versus a 76-passenger airplane has 26 more seats to sell. So it costs more to operate, but the revenue that it brings in should mean that it would be less of a burden than what we're looking at for the 50-passenger airplanes.
Mr. Januski, we're about halfway through your time already, so what I'd like to do is open the floor up for questions because there's going to be a lot of them.
That was that was my stopping point to.
Very good. Yep. Lisa, please.
Actually, I have a couple. So this is just strictly for SkyWest, not United.
That's correct. This is for the SkyWest service to Salt Lake City.
So what is stopping United for coming in and asking us also for another $800,000?
There would be absolutely nothing that would keep them from asking, except we have more frequency with United. So what I would see, if anything would happen with United, is they would take the demand for the service, and they may go from 4 flights a day to 3 flights a day, so that the demand is going to be higher on the 3 flights that they have, which would be more profitable for them. But we don't see that happening right now. But in essence, to answer your question, there's nothing that would keep them from doing it, except they have a lot more of the market share, and I don't see that they would look at doing something like this.
Just as a follow-up, so say these airlines start to become more profitable, because they have in the past significantly, do they refund us our money back?
They do not refund the money, but I will show you in our MRG history, the areas that you see are green, those are actually months. The difference is the budget is what they anticipated the loss to be. The actual is what they actually did. So in those 4 months in the MRG, we actually had a credit. So the credit carries forward. So the credit goes forward against any other type of loss. So we would not be looking at something, if we had basically self-sufficient service throughout the whole time, we would not pay anything. So from that standpoint, you really wouldn't be getting the money back. It would just be that there would not be any financial obligations.
Eric?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Glenn, we talk about an $850,000 guarantee, but it's actually a not to exceed number. And I think there may be, so can you explain how that and how the billing works and what the experience just has been up to this point with regard to how much of that maximum has actually been expended?
Sure. The difference column that you see here shows you that every single month except for 3 months, we actually had better performance, whether or not we actually had a credit going forward or it was just better performance compared to what they would anticipate. So they do billing on a quarterly basis. So it basically takes those 3 quarters and we do it on a quarterly basis, but it goes for the whole contract term. So if all of a sudden you paid out for 3 months but had a credit for the next 3 months, that 3 months credit would be applied to the 3 months that you paid. And the state again pays for 40% of this, the cost. So the county basically signs the contract and the state reimburses the county for that at 40%.
Kyle?
Thanks, Bruce. Thanks, Glenn, for the information. Lots of questions. I would agree with the mayor that I'm not looking to make a decision tonight. Hopefully we can have you back again. But the 40% guarantee from the state, do you know in this last legislative session, is that contribution from the state, has that been talked about in our legislative sessions? What is your feeling on the security of that towards the future?
For the 40% contract that is in place right now, that's already been approved. That was approved by the Aeronautics Commission. So going forward, the state has always had money to be able to pay for this because, again, without this, it jeopardizes the service in Rock Springs, Riverton, Sheridan, Gillette, and Cheyenne. A little bit in Cody, probably a little bit in Jackson. So it's been something that the state has funded for a long period of time. This is actually a program that was relatively new and unique at the time that the state put it in place. There was not other states. Other states have looked to Wyoming for this type of a program. So I would say that the funding has been relatively secure and stable since the time that the program has been put in place.
Thank you. Follow up if I may. Thanks for this supplemental information too. So am I reading this SkyWest history right in the sense that since November 21, looks like about 20 months ago, we have subsidized that air service to the tune of $932,000? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
My turn? So, I have several issues with this, and I'm just gonna start hitting you with them. The first is, in doing my research, SkyWest Airlines is worth $1.2 billion. So when they come to me asking for taxpayer money, it's an absolute no, period. I have promised fiscal responsibility when I took this post, and I think it is fiscally irresponsible to give taxpayer money to $1 billion company. So I'm absolutely 100% against it. Now, are there other ways to combat it? Yes. I look at Montana and I see an airport in Billings, I see an airport in Butte. So if you want to fly, you drive your 2 hours and you get on that plane. But Wyoming, for whatever reason, we have an airport in Rock Springs, we have one in Evanston, we have one in Riverton, we have one in Sheridan, we have one in Cody, we have one in Jackson, we have one in Casper, Cheyenne, Gillette. This is ridiculous for a state our size with this many people to have that many regional airports. So if we want to mainstream it and run an airline out of Jackson Hole and run one out of Casper, anybody in the state of Wyoming can drive within 2 hours and get on an airplane, just like you have to in a big city or anywhere else you live. Why that hasn't been looked at is beyond me. Why we're wasting millions and millions of federal and state and local dollars to do this is, I don't know whose business mind's behind this, but it's unreal to me that this is happening. So,
Historically, what has been done, and that, we don't have.
that doesn't make it right, Kermit.
I know, but we don't have anything to do with that. The reason that we're here asking for the MRG is that without it, we would lose the service.
I understand. So let me get to my next 2 points.
Specifically because this would not be a profitable leg for them.
I understand that. So let me get to my next 2 points.
Okay.
One would be, how much have we gone into the private sector asking for dollars before we come looking for taxpayer money? And what brings me to that is the LDS Church just built a brand new temple here. They're the richest organization on the planet. I would love to know if anybody walked and knocked on that door and asked them if they'd like to supplement a flight going to Salt Lake. Now, last time I talked to you, the answer was no.
Right, but we have since then.
Okay, great. So that's one thing. I think if private companies or private people want to do that, I don't think the taxpayers are going to be happy with this. I really don't.
And we have private individuals that are backing this.
And I understand that, which leads to my last question. If the county has already given you enough money to cover everything, plus with the state, you've got more than enough, why are you here asking for more municipal dollars when you already have enough to do the entire thing?
We're asking you to defray the cost of the county because it is the Casper /
So you're here on behalf of the county, then?
Yes.
Okay,
Mr. Mayor.
you absolutely may.
I did, to reiterate the private sector, Advanced Casper, private side, our board voted to subsidize or help with this cost, 20% to be capped out at $80,000. Tasma and her group so we're exploring the private sector of that. And then you're spot on with how many regional airports that we have. And this conversation's happening at every one of those, right? And so what we're trying to do is demonstrate to outlast the rest of that so that we then become that regional hub. Because we're geographically that anyway. And so if you start drawing that out 150 miles or 100 miles or whatever that means, you start to capture those other airports that just don't have the bandwidth as the Casper community does to extend that. So
Well, I would like to see somebody hold the airline itself accountable. This is $1 billion company we're talking about. They've probably got some good brains working there. And I don't imagine it would be very hard to go to them and say, you shut your service down everywhere else. We're going to load your planes in Casper 4 times a day. That would be a great business decision on my behalf if I'm on behalf of you or Delta or whoever it is. Why have those conversations not happened? Why are we taking the ideology that we're just going to outlast everybody else? Baloney. Do away with them. Find a way, get those guys at the table and let's say, we're done. You're not going to service them anymore. We're going to give you everything you need right here. I'm just wondering if those conversations have happened. It doesn't seem like they have based off of what I've heard. I don't think it is out of your purview. You're the airport board. You're the one asking for MRG money. You're the one responsible for funding this airline to keep flying out of Casper. And you can go back to them and say, here's exactly how we're going to do it. And it's not going to cost our taxpayers a penny. I think that's absolutely your purview.
Well, respectfully, if we did that right now, they would not serve the market. They don't have to serve the market. The reason why they got to be the company that they got is not by serving markets that they lose money in. So they're going to either continue to serve this market and the community gets the benefit from it. If you talk to the business community, and what will happen if you lose the service is you'll be losing 1 out of 3 carriers that you could potentially get. The economic pressure for United will be, we can price our tickets in Casper however we want to double price them. People can drive to Denver. We may pick them up in Denver, we may or not. But the difference is you're not gonna have the same type of pricing power that you have right now. Right now, if United says we wanna raise our prices, cause we're gonna take the chance people are gonna drive to Denver, but there's another carrier, cause nobody's gonna drive from here to Salt Lake City, they're gonna be able to keep the pressure lower. So from a business traveler standpoint, particularly our communities, by talking to SkyWest, they see you have a unique community. You actually have more business people that fly into Casper to do business with your companies than you have people here that fly out. So if you start losing the service and you lose the flexibility and you lose the connections with the hubs, you're not gonna have that. You're gonna have people that are gonna have to be able to fly into Denver and drive. And from a business community standpoint, it's gonna be devastating.
And I'll buy that. But that's why I ask you if you had gone to private business.
Yes.
Because based on what you just said, you're asking the private citizen that doesn't even fly out of here to fund that so business people could come in and do business. And I know financially, I'm fine. My wife and I fly out of here often if it's just the two of us. But if two of my children are going, we drive to Denver and I'll save $600-700 every single time by the time you buy 4 tickets. So like you said, though, it's business people coming in, but we're asking the private, everyday citizen to fund this with taxpayer dollars so that can happen.
And a point of clarification here, they didn't just ask for money and we automatically said yes.
No, I understand. I knew you guys were
So
against it
we
initially.
went through a process, and in fact, in November, they came back to us, asked us to extend it out because it was going to mature December 31st. We, the airport board, said no. Based on the information that they gave us, we would not support that because it wasn't economically viable. Then they came back and they said, if we can get through these contract negotiations and make it so that we can have 76 passenger airplanes coming in on SkyWest Delta, then we could be more profitable. If you can help us bridge that gap, which is what we are doing.
Well, we do have more questions for you, but the last thing I want to say is keep in mind when the very first MRG came, the fear was that now we've got an open door to the wallets of the taxpayers, and that is exactly what's happened since we gave them the very first one. It's never went away. It's never stopped.
But the market has changed. The market is not the same as it was when we talked about the first MRT. You did not have the pilot costs. You did not have the structural changes. And the only other thing I would say is everybody in the city benefits from the airport economically, whether or not they use the airport or not. Because everybody works and engages with businesses in the community whose existence and expansion and growth is dependent upon the airport.
That's a fair argument. Kyle,
Mr. Mayor,
just 1 minute, please.
You can go ahead.
Go ahead, Tasman.
Tasma with McMurray Companies. Casey, Rita, and I are here. We're actually with Fly Casper Alliance, which was the answer that we came up with when the first MRG came requested. And so our organization is looking at the MRG as a short-term solution and a short-term problem, honestly. And what else can this community and the businesses and the private and public sectors be doing to make Natrona County International Airport more successful? And I just wanted to make sure you understood there is an organization that is involving the private sector that is committed to seeing through the MRG and not having that be an issue any longer, but keeping air service and improving air service to our area.
Thank you. And I do want it to be very clear with my argument that I am not, I hate to see the pressure being put not just on our constituents, but on our businesses in order to maintain this. That's why I said I think the answer is to get rid of 8 or 7 of the regional airports we have in Wyoming, that it's ridiculous, and to where people have to drive to Casper to fly out. That's going to help our economy because we're going to have motels and everything else just like Denver has, and people eating in our restaurants, and it's only a 2-hour drive to get out of here. The answer is to get rid of the other airports. I'm telling you, I will go to my grave saying it. But Kyle, go ahead, please.
Thanks, Bruce. Thanks, Glenn, for the information. I got a lot of thoughts, but I know we're trying to be expedient in our meeting tonight. Could you speak a little bit more about SkyWest, this concept of working up towards a larger airplane? If the demand is there, if we could fill the seats, why don't they just pull the trigger? Why is it a process that we have to follow? Why can't they just upgrade? I imagine they keep analytics and they have statistics. if we expect to be able to fill the seats, my guess is they have the access to the same information. Why do we not have a bigger plane right now?
So SkyWest has contracts with Delta. Delta Pilots Union has what's called a scope clause. Up until now, Delta pilots said you can fly, the regional carriers can fly 50 passenger airplanes or less. Anything larger than the 50 passenger airplane has to be flown with a Delta pilot. So SkyWest could fly the 50 passengers all day. SkyWest would not be able to fly something larger. That has changed here recently. That's why we're going into the July timeframe, because we said, we need this. We need this. We know that they were starting to do this with one flight in St. George, Utah, which is where SkyWest headquarters are. I said, going forward, as Kermit said, I think the only way that this is going to be viable is if we look at those larger airplanes. Because again, you have an extra flight attendant, so there's some additional costs. Aircraft weighs more money or weighs more, so it's more fuel burn, so there is that portion of it. But if you can fly those extra seats without having to get to a second 50 passenger airplane, so you know, a fuel inefficient plane and a second fuel inefficient plane, that this would actually make more sense. And that's where we got to ourselves in July.
Amber.
Thanks. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about the notion that this is a short-term solution, and get a little bit more detailed information from Casper Alliance about what those projections are looking like what you foresee the timeline being before we have this larger airplane up and going, and when we might see that sort of threshold reached of that being self-sustaining.
We just found out recently the date when we would get the either the CRJ 900 or 700. So, knowing that it starts in July, there's a high likelihood that we will have near break-even profit in July. I mean, July's a strong month as well. So is August and September and October. So those months are good. Now, there will probably be lulls in the weaker travel months. January is never very good. February is short. But that's a tough one.
We don't exactly know what the configuration of these planes are going to be, but if they have a first class section, those will do a lot to pay for each of these flights, which we're anticipating that there will be a first class, business class section in these planes if they're bringing them.
And you can even look at the last month, the loss was $92,000. So we're looking at, as we get to the summertime, business travel has not picked up quite as much as, we haven't gotten back to the same point in time that we were before COVID. Leisure passengers have dwarfed that. So we don't get as many of the business travelers in the January, February, March timeframe. As soon as the weather starts to get nice, you'll see a tremendous increase in passengers as we get into when people have their kids out of school and people are taking vacations.
Go ahead.
Thanks. So as a follow-up, maybe it's more of a statement, but I think it would be a mistake to lose Delta, particularly if we believe that there is a path to sustainability for that flight. So, if I without seeing sort of that path laid out in front of me and that sort of breakdown, I just am taking your word for it at this moment that path exists. But given that we have a history of creating that path without an MRG throughout the duration of the airport's existence until recently, I feel optimistic that could be the case, and so I'm supportive of helping provide a stopgap to get to that point. And while I agree with you, Bruce, about the efficiency that would be achieved through consolidating airports. I haven't seen a lot of interest in communities consolidating much of anything for efficiency's sake in Wyoming ever.
That's right.
And those communities fight hard for their airports and their air service as well because they need it for their business community. So I don't anticipate that being, while it makes sense from an efficiency standpoint, I don't anticipate that being a practical reality in any near-term timeline. And so, I don't want to see Casper lose out, hoping that maybe, Wyoming will start to seek greater efficiencies in some of those things because we don't do it our school districts, we don't do it in like really anything across the board, so. And then maybe that's just, sort of the nature of being such a rural place, like, each community ultimately wants that convenience and that luxury, so they're gonna fight for it. And if we don't, then I fear that we would end up on the losing end of that stick.
Ray?
I think I would just add to, in terms of short-term plan, that tourism is obviously hand in hand in this, and Visit Casper is also a part of the Fly Casper Alliance, but it's easy to look at the local taxpayer, and if we lose out this service, it will impact the tourism dollars that come in from out of town. So not only are we looking at the convenience of leaving Casper, but we are also losing out on the dollars that would come in, which would cause the taxpayer to pay more anyway. So Glenn mentions the business traveler, but for each segment of tourism money, having this service is a separator for us that is important to our tourism economic health.
I'd like to add that having this flight to Salt Lake City is the shortest route to the West Coast and the money centers on the West Coast to bring investments into our community. And because Casper is a business center of the state, it's really critically important to us.
Agreed. Ray?
So more of a statement than anything else, but I'm tentatively supportive of it. And the reasons why is because of the partnership with the private sector. I think we need to continue to go down that road. And at the risk of repeating what Amber was saying, I think it's going to be critical for us to also look at the long-term goal of us, like as Amber put it so well, a stopgap to be able to do that. And so I'm tentatively willing to support this, how that will look. I'm not sure where everybody else stands on it, but what kind of pushed me over is the partnership. If the private sector can come in, I'm all for partnerships. I think partnerships are what make everything go, even that with the government and the private sector has to partner to some extent. So.
And that would look really good in our letter back to them that says we have broad-based community support.
Right.
Because a lot of these other places didn't even get the opportunity to make that statement.
Yep.
So,
Great. Kyle?
Thanks, Bruce. And thanks for everyone for all the information. I want to go back to a comment Luke made and tie it back to Amber's comments. I'm somebody who can't afford to fly out of Casper regardless of whether SkyWest is there or not. But I do see the economic impact, business class flying out, but also the tourism coming in. And so I would agree that it helps me to have a better idea of how long this MRG program is expected to last. I'm glad to hear that the optimistic opinion is maybe just several months until we can get a bigger plane. But when I look at this $930,000 subsidy over the past 18 months, I compare that to, say, our subsidy at the event center. The event center, we know we get $25 million of economic impact for our subsidy up there. So I wonder, this $930,000, are we getting anywhere close to 25 million? I guess what's frustrating to me is we can at least sort of quantify what we get from the event center. This MRG program seems very, abstract. Yes, people have the opportunity to fly out. Yes, tourism comes in, but I haven't seen anyone quantify that. And so that's what's tough for me to wrap my head around because, again, that subsidy's decent. That's almost $1 million over a year and a half. And so to me, it's a lot easier to justify it for the event center when you could say $25 million in our local restaurants, retail stores, and other things. But it's harder for me to wrap my head around when it's a little more abstract like this.
Amber?
Jasmine, did you want to respond to that? Bruce?
Not directly.
Go ahead. Yes, please.
So Casey's really the brains behind the Fly Casper Alliance, but I guess I talk more. Short term, we are working on increasing marketing to have people make it easier for them to realize that it's not more expensive to fly out of Casper, especially if it's just Kyle. To do the correlation that to drive to Denver, to pay for parking, to pay for gas, to pay for that compared to the ticket, especially on United, no offense to the Delta fare prices. But also we are a regional hub, and to do some marketing in those outlying communities that don't want to drive to Denver because that's a 7-hour drive and not a 3.5 hour. So that's our short-term solution is marketing. Our mid-term solution is to work on becoming a regional hub for other flights as well, and that's super complicated. And then long-term, we're working on a pilot training, scholarship, program to have more pilots prefer Casper, get trained in Casper, and be proud of their Casper relationship and help SkyWest solve their pilot problem. So I know you had a path to sustainability question. I wanted to let you know that that is some of the stuff that the Fly Casper Alliance is doing to try and look past the MRG.
Let me ask you a question, if I may. If because we're running over on time here, and I need to be cognizant about that. But if we were to table this for now and not make a decision, is this something we could revisit in August? Because you've already got all the funding you need to get you through this next year. And the reason I ask if we could push it to August is that would give us a very clear and concise idea of what it's going to be like with the bigger jet, with 2 of your better months, and really get a really good idea where the sustainability is rather than predictability.
I mean, the money is there already.
Right.
So we have the state funding, but it doesn't show any type of buy-in from the city in the near term. So I would say that would be the downside.
But it does show you regional buy-in because the county includes the taxpayers within the city of Casper. So you could still word it very easily that you have buy-in from the Casper and surrounding communities. It's Casper money. The county money comes from the people that live in Casper.
Yeah, I see a clear distinction there, but I mean,
It's all marketing, Kermit, and you know it just as well as I do. So, because I'll be honest with you, I would like to reach out to our constituents. I would like to find out how they feel about this. That's what drives this council, that's what drives this city, or the people that live in it. And I would like to find out where they're at on it, because they're already funding the county money that you're being funded with. So, I really want to know what our people think about this. I think we owe them that responsibility. So, go ahead, Justin.
Well, I just quickly, thank you again, Mr. Mayor and Council, that the $900,000 is, or the $1 million, the state's picking up 40% of that. So, and Advanced Casper and CAD, and so then the private sector. So we've been, building this plane as it flies because we haven't been in this situation before. The goal is that by the time this larger aircraft gets here, those numbers are wrong. They've been wrong thus far. We have not gone we've not hit any of their predictable expense thus far. So the goal is that we don't come back in here and say, yeah, we had to write that entire check and now there's a bigger plane here. The goal is that we show that we're profitable during those months. Then we have the capacity to even be more profitable, and then it goes away.
Well, understand this about me. I will never run for office again when my term is up. So I'm not looking for votes. I'm not trying to placate to the people that elected me. This is literally me trying to do the right thing and trying to be responsible with this municipal money. So I think if you look at it from that point of view and put my shoes on, as opposed to, oh my God, he's worried about votes. No, he's not. He's never running again. This is just me trying to be responsible and fiscally responsible with our taxpayers' money. That's all it is, just so you're aware. I'll let you respond and then we are gonna move on.
I've got one more question, and it's maybe it might need a follow-up answer at some point. I don't know if you can answer it immediately, but the only element of this that is still a bit of a question mark for me is how is SkyWest's target budget derived, and do we have any control over that? Can they just say, well, we want 20% profit, or we want 30, or next year, now that we got there, we want 50, and we have to constantly keep meeting it? Is there some sort of like definable margin that they're trying to hit that is predictable for us, so that if we really do all this marketing, we get people on the planes and they're hitting that, they're not gonna come back to us and say like, well, we're not really meeting what we'd like our minimum revenue to be, even if it is like profitable?
That's a great question.
That's right. So we would get into the Journey concert, which I'm going to also, if I had to explain all of that.
Okay, sure.
There is an answer, and maybe at a future, if there's an opportunity at a future meeting or one-on-one, I can sit down with you because there is a rationale, and that's actually probably more logical than what you would think. But there is a calculation that goes through in terms of the block hour cost from the time that it pulls out of one gate to next gate, fuel costs and so forth. And you can also play some what-if games. Well, what if passenger loads go from 62% to 70%? What does it do in terms of profitability? So there is that there, and I'd be happy at some point in time to sit down and share it as a group or individually.
And I'll speak for all of us. We are all happy to take a call, answer questions via email, however you want to get them out to us. And, please feel free to let us know. We'll do our best to answer the question. If we don't have the information, we will find it. Glenn is excellent at that, so.
Well, I think at this time, Journey concert aside, by the way, but we do have agendas that we need to follow. So I guess I would ask the council if it is okay with you if we were to not table this, but maybe reset it again so that we can discuss this even further and have a better, get our minds, invite them back actually, and because we brought up a lot of points, maybe they'll have some other answers for those. And maybe we'll have some different numbers to look at. I would like to put this on a future agenda and revisit it again without saying no or yes at this time. If you guys are okay with that, I need a thumbs up. Sir?
Really quick, I do want to make sure that I don't want it to get lost in the shuffle. We've got a lot on our grid, but I also want to make sure that this is something we're not trying to be like,
No.
oh no, here you go. We'll talk to you in about
No,
6 months.
if I tell you we're gonna look at it again, we will look at it again very soon. We do have budgets coming up, but we're not gonna put you on a back burner and forget about it. That will not happen. I don't know, and I may be wrong. If you folks are prepared to make a decision at this time, I'm not gonna stand in your way of doing that either.
I'm just curious if they have a drop dead date that they need a commitment from the.
That's a great question. Kermit, is there a specific date that we need to have a decision made by? I mean, I'm sure you'd like to walk out of here tonight with a big old yes in your pocket, but the question is there a specific date that we need to kind of have this wrapped up?
Next month would work pretty well for us. I mean, we can still get some propaganda out.
Do we have the ability to revisit this with budgets coming within the next month?
Betcha.
All right, then we will do that, and I will have the city manager's office reach out to you and make sure that you have an opportunity once again when we revisit it within the next 30 days. Is that fair?
Yes, and thank you very much.
Absolutely. Is everybody okay with that?
Yeah. I'd like to just add one more thing. In
Please.
the last 24 months, Casper's had 2 companies relocate here from the Pacific Northwest.
Right.
And the Delta flight has been really integral in helping those people and their families move to this community. And that's really helping the community overall and the taxpayers and the private sector who is contributing through the tax dollars. And I applaud you for being cautious with spending taxpayer dollars. So I just want to bring that up, that Delta flight is really helping us recruit companies and more dollars into the community.
Well, and final, I want you to understand me personally. I understand the value that it brings to our community. There's no question. There's none. I get it. I just want to make sure we're exploring everything. And when the county ponies up that kind of money of taxpayer dollars that these people in our community are already paying, and now we're asking them for a little bit more of that taxpayer money, we just have to be really diligent and really careful about how we go about doing that so that we're covering all the bases and our decisions are sound, and that's really where it comes from. But in the next 30 days, we'll have you an answer one way or the other, and you'll be invited back for that if that works for you.
Great.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you folks very much. I appreciate all your
Thank you.
All right, moving on, Highland Park Tennis MOU Amendment, Mr. City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Councilors, this is the formal ask, if you will, with regard to direction that the council has already given us at one point in time as it relates to our relationship with the tennis complex project that we have with the school district. The thrust of the amendment is simply that pursuant to the direction you've given us already, which is as it relates to the northernmost courts, that we would reformat those courts, resurface those courts, and then yield the entire complex to particularly as it relates to those courts, to the school district for permanent ownership and long-term maintenance. That is the thrust of this amendment. We want to give you the opportunity to ask any clarifying questions in that it may have been the previous council that gave us this direction
It was.
compared to the new council, as it were.
It was all of us minus Jenna, Michael, and Brandy.
Yep.
And literally, like the city manager said, it just comes down to the fact that we're gonna resurface the tennis courts and the pickleball courts. We're gonna hand them over to the school district, and they'll take care of the maintenance forever on, from the lights to the surfaces to whatever it is. And we had already given permission to do so, so yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Amber, go ahead.
My question is on behalf of all my pickleball playing friends. I know we're gonna resurface it, but there's been a number of questions that I've gotten about wind abatement. Is there any element of that worked into this project, or is it strictly resurfacing?
Mr. Mayor,
Sir.
Counselor, the commitment was for resurfacing.
Okay, so it would be up to the school district at that point to deal with any.
Is it a very light ball? So the wind like.
Yes.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So like, they'd need to put like that tarping around the bottom half or the see-through stuff or whatever?
Yeah,
Gotcha.
from what I understand, yes.
Well, I specifically remember ours, it was resurfacing and then handing it over, so.
So I just want to clarify so the amendment part is that the original MOU was use of those courts by the school district?
No, the amendment part is to do the pickleball courts also.
In addition to the tennis courts?
Correct.
Gotcha. Thank you.
That's the amendment,
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to clarify.
correct?
Well, and Mr. Mayor, just to make sure I'm not confusing maybe what your question was, the city has no obligation with anything else. The district is doing all the courts.
Yeah.
They're doing all the construction. We are simply and only doing the pickleball
Gotcha.
on the northernmost courts, which will actually equate to 8 pickleball courts for you aficionados with pickleball.
And the original MOU had this transfer of ownership and maintenance, right? Still, so
That's correct.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
That's exactly right.
So if everybody is okay with that, we will sign the amendment and send it on over to the school district. And that will become theirs after we resurface the 8 pickleball courts for Amber's friends.
Yep.
Okay.
Pickleball friends.
Amber's pickleball friends.
That's what I call them. I've found that way.
All right, let's move on. Our next big ticket item is the camping ordinance. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councilors. In many ways, this is a part 2 of revisions that your colleagues previously enacted as it relates to this issue of camping on public grounds and, to a larger extent, camping in private property, particularly where it may be unwarranted or unallowed. This has come again to the surface, if you will, as a part of the conversations that the city has been having with what I would call a homeless consortium that has been organized around the idea of what we can do better as a community to manage and work with our social service agencies and partners for the unhoused population in our community. A lot of questions came up during that discussion that led to the matters contained now and memorialized in the camping ordinance that we may potentially want to consider changing or amending or altering to some degree. Our request to you tonight is to help us define that scope that this could potentially take, and as you will soon hear from the city attorney, can metastasize rather quickly into a number of large issues, and so therefore the need to help get scope definition from all of you as it relates to what you'd like to see come forward in a draft, amendment, or whatever that you would direct. So,
Which ultimately gives our law enforcement teeth, if you will, to be able to handle the situation, which is really the main reason we're here today.
or potentially more tools.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
And so yes, that is a discussion we'd like to have with you tonight. It's certainly possible this too may need a part 2 as well before we bring a draft forward to the floor for your formal deliberative process. And with that, Mr. Mayor, if I could defer to the city attorney, I appreciate it.
Mr. Nelson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councilors. City Manager Napier kind of set this up very well, and I planned on going through some of that, so thanks. I can kind of cut to the chase. Since I started here a few months ago, I've had an opportunity to be part of the homeless initiative. And I've met with Chief McFeeters, and we've discussed various strategies to address some of the issues that are being posed in our community. And in our memo, we kind of broke it down into three kind of buckets, if you will. And so one has to do with camping both on private and public property. And back in 2019, there were some amendments to the Casper ordinance to really beef up the prohibition on camping in public spaces and parks. But what continues to be an issue is camping on private property. Now, that can be with or without authority from the owner. So we have numerous owners who live out of state who may have private property, and so there are some certain challenges there. This really has some spillover into code enforcement as well. And so, what we would propose moving forward is to work collaboratively with our code enforcement and our police department to try to develop some strategies to combat, if you will, inappropriate camping on private properties. And this, can spill over into like the RV camping ordinance and the prohibitions thereon. And what I'll say, just generally speaking, everything I'm talking about, it's going to be the backstop of constitutional law, which I'll get to in a minute. The second issue that has been identified is, especially around our river area, we have homeless camps. And so a lot of times there's, unattended stuff with you, if you will. And some of that can be very benign things. Some of that can be very posing a health and safety risk. And so how can we, within the bounds of the law, really approach that as well? So that's kind of the second bucket of things, is how to deal with that. The third idea that we came up with, and this is being employed in Fort Collins, is to designate certain areas of the city, i.e. Perhaps a river corridor or something that would be somewhat akin maybe to a zoning district that would prohibit camping because of the health and safety issues posed by camping along a waterway. And so those are kind of the three areas that we would like to maybe explore. Now, the tricky part of this is that there's ever-evolving case law. Of course, is not uncommon in Wyoming. There's no Wyoming case law, and ironically, there's no 10th Circuit case law directly on point. So we're left to looking to 9th Circuit precedents in California. And so, some of our ability to enact ordinances and really beef up our policing ability has to do, based on that case law, with the number of available low entry beds in our homeless shelters. And so, for instance, getting the point in time numbers, getting the number of beds, and kind of analyzing that is going to be key. There's a case out of Los Angeles in the 9th Circuit where they went into a very long explanation of the ability of law enforcement to clean up homeless camps, for instance. And so they're, it's very clear when it poses a health and safety issue. I mean, we can clean it up. We don't have to hold it. If it's clearly abandoned or it's clearly trash, we can dispose of it. But if somebody has their personal belongings and it's unclear as to whether or not it's been abandoned, there may be some requirements under the Constitution to basically store that stuff and give notice to the best we can to whoever's items they may be. So it gets very complicated. It's ever changing. Colorado has seen a number of ordinances that have been enacted in Colorado Springs and in Fort Collins, and there's been some legal challenges. So far what I can find, none of that's really risen to the 10th Circuit level. It's all been handled either on the district court level, which is non-binding precedent, or through settlements or agreements. So some of the other things that you can look at within those bounds is beefing up like loitering ordinances, or ordinances that prohibit sleeping on a park bench or downtown on a sidewalk. So there's various ways to approach it. Also, apart from ordinance changes, I think some of this may be just developing operating procedures and the PD and for city staff and parks and code enforcement, if some of this is encountered, what can they do within the bounds of the law? So I think generally this is kind of where we're looking to head. Chief, did I miss anything? Or no, he's giving me the thumbs up, so I guess I hit all the high points. I'd be happy to answer any questions. And I know we're gonna get out of here before 6. I'm not gonna stop.
Where it comes, I'm assuming there's nothing on Wyoming's books because the 8 or 9 months that are uninhabitable for a homeless person, generally, we don't have that big, not like we've had recently. We seem to be overrun with the homeless population. So I would imagine sooner or later, there's going to be some precedent-setting, case law. But in the meantime, I guess, what is your direction? You gave us a lot of information, and I for one, can tell you, nobody on this council wants them sleeping on the river and pitching tents there so that when kids are riding their bikes down the path, they got some guy coming up out of the river buck naked or just waking up out of bed. So we certainly want to protect our waterways. We don't want them defecating and urinating in them and sleeping by them. And I would also think in public places, we don't want that. We don't want them on our park benches downtown when we have tourism coming through and we got a homeless guy sleeping on the bench down there. It's not something we would want, I wouldn't think. Where the real issue comes in, I think, is the private property. And unfortunately, I think we do have to do something, even though it's private property. We have to put some guidelines on there, not only for the people who are maybe not in state at the time and somebody's just squatting on their property so that we can help them as well, but to stop a mentally ill person from allowing a bunch of homeless people to camp in their yard and create a bunch of messes and disturbances and garbage. So with that said, where do we kind of...
So Mayor...
Chief, are you wanting to weigh in, or?
Mayor, if I could.
Sure, of course.
So one of the Mayor Council, thank you for the opportunity to address this. One of the situations that we are chronically running into, and I'm not saying chronically like it's twice a day.
Sure.
Is this arrival, we're dispatched to an obvious problem. But when we get there, we are met with the foundational elements of our existing ordinance prohibits us from taking any action. So, an example, there's a home just over here. The owner of the home passed away. The home went into an estate and probate process. In the interim, while that was working out, and there was no declared ownership of it, nobody was responsible for it, it got quickly identified as come here. And so we were having to deal with buckets of fecal matter. There was anywhere from, a combination of vehicles, RVs, tents, trailers, all of it just showed up and kind of got Tetrised into a very small area. And eventually the home, as you can imagine, gets broken into so that they can use the facilities in there, but there was no water, so there was accumulation. On those circumstances, we got, we're trying to contact banks, we're, trying to work through probate. We have had several occasions over here where the owner is vacant, they've moved, the home never sold, it needed repaired, maybe not sellable under the condition it is. It quickly gets identified. We show up, people are jumping out of windows and running away. The ones that we do talk to say, oh no, I had permission to be here. And we have nobody that we can contact. And yet the debris, the public safety, the health hazards, all of those things are presenting themselves. And in one particular case that really got my attention as your chief of police, as my officers were clearly, they got dispatched by 2 different callers to that guy there is something wrong here. 2 different citizens called in. We got there, the guy is on private property, he claimed the ability to be there, that he had permission. We could not independently verify that. It got this close to becoming, the guy was hyper aggressive, whatever his mental health came this close to becoming a police use of force over something that we just, common sense said, okay, there's a problem here, but we lack the tools to do it. So the frequency and proclivity with which a segment of our population, perhaps in need of services, but they can very quickly identify and spot that property that is amenable to this type of becoming a flop house, a flat property, and taking advantage of that. And we are limited in our ability to deal with the health and safety aspects of that. We're limited in our ability to protect that distant owner or that limited liability corporation or the estate under these circumstances. So that this current limit to only allowing us to enforce things that are occurring on public property, that segment of our population that is in need of that additional services are quick to adapt and move on to that, and that's what we're experiencing. So we would recommend from the police department point of view, given these examples that I've given you and the frequency with which that is occurring, we would recommend strengthening that kind of common sense regulation of helping us deal with those private property instances. And I can say in the county, they have the same thing going on. They've got a property owner that just says, hey, come, so now there's 28 people living in tents with no toilet services and things like that. So it's a problem all over, but we would recommend that council consider that number one option of helping us regulate camping in our community, both on private and public properties.
Agreed. Lisa?
And I'm not sure which one this goes to, but I thought we already had like a squatter ordinance in place that was already in place so that people, if you found somebody that was somewhere they weren't supposed to be, we just needed to call the police.
But they can't verify, like in that situation, they couldn't verify that he didn't have permission. That was the problem.
So Mayor,
Sir.
councilors, yeah, I think that is the issue that the chief was alluding to is you're unable to verify if they have permission. Now, I've been doing some research and I'm finding not a lot of precedent for the ability to go in and from a law enforcement standpoint and be more aggressive because it is private property and you've got certain constitutional rights and you misstep and then you might end up getting sued. So I think, what I've seen, this is something that's is being struggled with nationwide, and it really is going to take a combined effort between PD and code enforcement. I think right now our ordinance allows, 7 days consecutive camping on private property, but there's no restriction on the number of days total in a year. And so we can look at tightening those up. We can look at adding to the ordinance, health and safety regulations that would give us maybe, reasonable basis to make contact, to take further, enforcement actions. But there's always a tension, and because of some of the lack of clarity in the case law, it's going to be really a question of, how aggressive does council want to be in kind of pushing that. We probably won't get any cases out of Wyoming, but Colorado, I'm assuming at some point we will. But, is this a path that council is okay with us pursuing, I think is what we're asking for
Lisa?
today.
Is that 7-day camping, is that where the ordinance is that house during the summer, everybody puts their camper in their street so they can go camping?
It's part of that, yes, that is related. So I've talked to, I think it's separate, but it's related, right?
This is separate from the parking permits for RVs. It's separate from that.
No, I wasn't talking about the permit. So supposedly, like, we have 7 days. So if you're gonna go camping, you can't have your camper in the street longer than 7 days. So I guess if you're loading and unloading, a lot of people just keep their campers in the street to do that, and then they move it in under a week or to do whatever. But it's not parking it's parking literally on the street in residential neighborhoods.
Sir?
Mayor, Councilwoman, Councilor. Council has adequately supplied us with the ordinances that are necessary to deal with the people that have an RV associated with their property. We do have a problem, strictly from our code enforcement division here in the city, of people that do the wink wink, go ahead and pull your RV onto our property and have that become your permanent residence, and here run an extension cord from our outlet to that. That is currently not addressed and is a soft spot in our thing. And so you have already given us the tools to address the homeowner who has an RV, their seasonal use of that. We have all of the tools in place for that. There's no complaints. on that. This is to address the homeowner who has now got a fifth wheel and an RV and 3 tents on their property because, for whatever reason.
Amber?
So I would say just broadly on this issue, I don't feel particularly comfortable delving into this until we've had a more comprehensive presentation from the conversations that have happened with this coalition. I feel like I think policy is gonna be a critical tool for addressing the issue, but I also think it's going to be one of many tools, and I think that there's a real chance that we make a misstep here and have that we end up with creating issues that we don't anticipate without having a really solid understanding of what this current situation is, how we expect it to evolve over time, what other communities are dealing with. And so I do not like discussing this in a vacuum as if I might be able to pluck a solution out of thin air when it's such a dynamic and rapidly evolving situation across the country and the region. And so I would like to request that we don't deal with any of this in a vacuum, and that we do get a more context provided from the coalition, from those conversations that have happened, so we feel like we have our arms wrapped around the scope of the situation before trying to handle these things. I don't think personally that making being homeless illegal is a solution in and of itself. I think there are obviously policies that need to be put in place to mitigate the harm and reduce the impact to the public and reduce the safety hazards and all of that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, I feel like woefully ill-equipped to really to address this without having what I'd like to see would be a report or presentation from the coalition that addresses policy in context.
Kyle?
Thanks, Bruce. I can appreciate Amber's comments. As liaison to the Homelessness Task Force, I'm joined now by Councillor Bond, so I appreciate him joining me on that. I support this ordinance, and it might reassure you a little bit to know that we've discussed, an overarching philosophy or a way to go about this. One of the tools that I brought to the Homeless Coalition Task Force is this report. I believe it was from Oregon or Washington, Northwest somewhere. Discovery Institute Center on Wealth and Poverty, Compassion with Results is the name of the report. Happy to send it to you if you're interested. They kind of outline 7 things that they've done lots of research, homelessness in lots of communities, and so these are kind of like their 7 bullet points for things that you can be doing to address this in a evidence-based manner. The first one is immediately build a safe ground facility. That idea is controversial still. I'm interested in exploring it further, but I know our PD has concerns about it and some of the other stakeholders at this meeting. But that's their number 1 recommendation. Number 2 is adopt a policy of compassionate enforcement. And they make the point of saying that tolerance of public camping has turned into permissiveness, and that degrades the quality of neighborhoods. And third is enforcing a strict ban on public camping. 4th is implementing policies to mitigate the addiction crisis. 5th is to orient services around a philosophy of transformation. 6th is to provide paid work opportunities for people in need. And 7 is to lobby for conservatorship for the severely mentally ill. And so I'm sure there's lots of resources out there. This was just one that I plucked, and it was actually presented to me from a former council member's wife. So I was thankful for her showing me this. I really like this document. It's very evidence-based, and it seems to support some of the movement that we're making on this ground. I think a presentation from the Homelessness Task Force would be great. I don't know if that task force has gotten far enough along to be able to have like a real concrete understanding of what to do. This is just one of the things that the chief had identified from the police department that could be one of the first action items out of this community or out of this coalition. It's a very large issue. We're not going to solve national homelessness here in the city of Casper, but there's some little things that we can do on a municipal level to make sure that we are offering generous, compassionate resources while not also creating this culture of permissiveness or a tolerance for things that should be not allowed. Public camping on streets, panhandling, taken over abandoned or vacant buildings. And so happy to pass along whatever resources we've shared in this group for anyone interested.
And second, additionally to that, I can assure you that this is not about criminalizing or making homelessness illegal. It's not. What this is about doing is protecting our way of life, our citizens, helping to eliminate safety hazards that it's creating in a compassionate way, but it gives our police at least an opportunity to say, no, you can't do this. You can't squat in someone's house and defecate up to the second floor. And I mean, that's really what the teeth are of this. Anyway, go ahead.
I would like that, and that does help to some extent. Though my fear is that it sounds great to be able to provide generous, compassionate resources. I'm not sure we have the capacity to do that. So, if they're not paired together in a way that those things exist, and so we can enforce these things and say, here's the alternative that we have prepared. To me, that doesn't feel particularly compassionate. So I would like to read the report you're referencing, and I think I agree with many of the sort of approaches that are on there. I'm glad to hear that a philosophy, an overarching philosophy, has sort of been agreed upon, because I think that's going to be the first most primary. We got to have buy-in on a particular philosophy on how to deal with this, because there are that's those 7 things are that's a lifetime worth of work at minimum, right? So yes, I would like to see that. I would like to see this conversation happen in that context. What is if we're not entertaining, or a safe ground is too controversial, to me those things have to be paired sort of hand in hand, right? You can't, if we don't offer a solution, I don't think that we should be trying to tighten up some of these things, with the exception of, I would happily entertain some of these public health concerns, right? I think that some of those things, if we need more guidance around what rises to the level of creating a public health concern, and those are areas where I'm very comfortable discussing those sorts of things. But otherwise, I would like to see more information from the coalition.
Just relax, I'll get to you, I promise. I will tell you, this is one of the few times I'm opposed to what you're saying, simply because I don't think we always have to have a piece of cake to give to somebody after we paddle their ass. It's kind of the way I see this. They are doing illegal things. They are destroying public and private property. That is a no-no. It's against the law. It should not be allowed to happen. Our police should be able to step in and say, you can't do that, and you need to stop doing that. And we need to have the ability through this ordinance, constitutionally written, of course, as Eric would do, to say, this is not appropriate, we can't do this. Like you said, I think it's a lifetime of work to tackle the mental health part of it, the compassionate side of this. But right now, we have ordinances that are about law, and we have legal issues that are being violated, putting our citizens at risk. Their properties, their property values, their safety, through the hazards of their defecation and the other things they're doing, and leaving their trash all over the place. And that is what has to be dealt with first. We've got to stop the problem first before we can get on to a solution-based, I believe. But Lisa, go ahead. Eric, go ahead, please.
Well, if I might, Mayor, Councilor Pollack, so you really hit on kind of a fundamental key here. So we can draft ordinances that facially are constitutional, but the test is that if there aren't certain services available, like a low hurdle bed for somebody to stay in, and then we say you can't camp on the sidewalk, what the courts have said is now you're criminalizing being homeless, and it's now a status offense, and it runs afoul of the 8th Amendment as cruel and unusual punishment. It runs afoul of the 4th and 14th Amendment to the Constitution. So part of my job and to working collaboratively with the group would be to gather that information and ascertain what do we have available in terms of resources in this community. And that in large part is going to drive what we as a municipality can do legally. Now, if it's a health and safety issue, if they're, destroying property or squatting on private property, I mean, that doesn't matter, your status as homeless or not, I mean, that's illegal conduct. But when you start pushing the envelope on, well, you can't sleep on a park bench or you can't camp on a sidewalk, they're gonna look and say, do they have any alternative? And if they don't, they're gonna say that is an illegal application of that ordinance. So I would wholeheartedly agree that it's gotta be a holistic approach. I think at the last meeting that we had, it became very clear to me that, one, we need to really kind of lay out those goals, but two, that there's really two paths that need to be taken. One is the enforcement path, but then one is, okay, so what resources do we need in this community to help combat that? Whether it's, additional beds, it's a day center. One of the cases, in Grants Pass, they had a day center that could accommodate 50 or 75 people, during the day. Colorado Springs, they have not seen a rise in homelessness like the rest of the state. So there's a study, they said, well, what was it that happened? Well, they did an $18 million facility where they expanded to a 14-acre campus, and suddenly all of that started to, so is it a matter of more enforcement? Is it a matter of, more resources? It's probably both. And really, I think when we talk about enforcing, it's for those individuals that, despite having recourse to these resources, choose not to take advantage of them and continue to break the law. So it is a balance, and it's just, we're gonna have to thread that needle, and what we really wanna do is kind of lay that out for council tonight, and just, is this a direction that you all wanna see us continue to work for? I don't think we're anywhere near getting a draft ordinance in front of you guys on some of this stuff. I mean, there's work to be done.
Lisa?
Was a lot of what Eric was going to say. It's because this is not just somebody who's just without a home. You have a multitude of different issues. I've had handymen that's been attacked. I've had them rush at us just by showing a house, and it was supposed to be vacant, and I walk in and you get rushed. It's kind of terrifying when you know nobody's supposed to be there. So, and they're not there just living. They're setting up meth houses and things of that nature. So we do need something a little bit stronger to stop all of that, but with all of the homelessness, plus don't we also need to kind of the busing of people here? That also is part of all of this as well, right?
So Mayor, Councilor, that is an aspect of it, and we did hear back from a neighboring county, and the municipality is not sending people here, but they have a consortium of nonprofits who, when people come and say, I need a bus ticket to Casper, they're funding that. And so, the Constitution, again, is gonna prohibit us from saying, you can't come here, you've got the right to freedom and to go where you want. But I think there needs to be more communication with other communities, with our nonprofits, our providers, so that when they're sending somebody down here on a bus that doesn't have a place to stay, that doesn't have resources, that our PD is made aware, our providers are made aware, so that we can deal with it when they get here. And so that was a conversation we had with Johnson County folks last week. But so yeah, I think that's absolutely a part of this, but it's a broader conversation.
Michael, did you have a question?
No.
Okay. So we can go several directions here. We can ask Eric to start looking at the constitutionality of it all and trying to fit together some type of an ordinance to help our police department help these people. We can, I'm sorry, you wanted to add something before I go any further, didn't you?
Well, Mr. Mayor, and we may be going to the same point here.
By all means, please.
The challenge that we've had with the discussion with the Homeless Coalition is, it is a big task to solve homelessness. I don't care where you are. It could be little town Casper, or it could be big town Portland, we all have the same challenges. Our problem is, we've been funneling a lot of these solutions through an immediacy filter, hence the reason we're here tonight. We've got problems that are immediately in our face. I think Counselor, you've identified one of them. Another one that we have an immediate problem with is complaints coming in with respect to campsites, and no real, SOP to deal with those. And so we need some help, frankly, is where we're at. And we don't feel comfortable moving forward without any solutions that we can deploy.
Anybody been to downtown Denver, to the Capitol? You've seen it then. I don't want that here. Our people that live here don't want that here. And this is the reason we've got to do something now. Because considering our cold weather months, which are about between 8 and 9 months out of the year, we start allowing that stuff to happen, it's gonna go. And then sooner or later, somebody's gonna light a fire because they're freezing cold, and the wind's gonna come up, and they're gonna burn down 5 houses. I mean, you gotta draw the line somewhere, and I understand the compassion necessary. I get it, I do. But we have got to draw some lines, and this council has to do that. We've got to protect the people that live here. We've got to protect our way of life, and we also have to protect those people by not allowing them to be in abandoned homes with those services. And it goes just beyond us. It's them as well. So I would urge you, as part of this council, to give Eric some latitude here to start digging into some constitutional law that will. He already knows what the issues are. He's on that homeless coalition. He understands the issue probably better than any of us do, aside from Kyle and Michael, who are also on that. But I would like to give him the latitude to say, get with the chief, figure out exactly what verbiage, what it is we're trying to accomplish, and go get it done. And so I guess I'm asking you for the permission to give him the permission to do that. So if everybody's okay with that, I would take a thumbs up. Okay, very good. So, Mr. City Attorney.
Do you mind if I add to that, Mr. Mayor?
Please do.
I would also suggest that we really need a protocol that you are largely comfortable with as it relates to dealing with routine complaints that we get about campsites in our river corridors, our pathway corridors, and so on, that passes similar muster, but also gives us some direction that we can.
Yeah, because that has to stop. We have so many young children and women who run those paths and ride their bikes on those paths, and these guys are popping up out of the weeds, after waking up in the morning, with not even clothes on. They can't be camped in there. They can't be sleeping there. So you'll have to incorporate that into, not just the private stuff, but to protect our public stuff as well. And, we do have beds available for those people. Now, some of them understandably ruin their opportunity to be there by their behavior or, their drinking or whatever it is. And then I believe constitutionally, we're off the hook with them. So we've got to figure out what to do with those people. In a caring and compassionate way. I don't know what the answer to the mental health aspect is and the substance abuse when it comes to homelessness, but we as a council have a real opportunity here to not just help our people, but to help them as well. So if you could keep that in mind when you're doing this, it would be well received, I would think.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, sir.
Council.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I need to be sure I understand my direction here. I'm sorry, if you don't mind.
No, I gave him direction. I didn't give you any yet.
And he needs it. Yeah, that's right. Are you okay with us coming back to you with a standard operating procedure as it relates to dealing with campsites? And
I believe that's what we're asking him to do, a constitutional document that addresses public and private camping issues like that.
I certainly heard that, Mr. Mayor, from an ordinance standpoint. I need the blessing to come forward from a policy standpoint as well.
Well, I think there are times where, like, if you go back to our ordinance that we just passed, forgive me, the last big ordinance we did, the big one.
Discrimination?
The anti-discrimination ordinance, thank you. We waited for Cheyenne, we waited for somebody. I think it's okay to get out there and be the first ones to do it. I think it's appropriate. We are the largest community in the state here, and I think it's okay for us to break ground. And I think you'll see a lot of other communities follow suit with us.
Good deal.
So
it sounds like a bifurcated yes.
I believe so. Is that everybody okay with that? Okay,
Awesome.
all right, thank you.
That is all I have for that.
All right, let's move on.
I don't know really what any of that.
Well, you'll find out when he brings it to us, and
Yeah, that's why I was like,
then we're gonna have to vote on it at that
Support it
time.
or not, I don't know, I mean.
Well, I'll tell you what I would like to do, in the meantime, while he is working on this, if we get an opportunity to get a presentation from the Homeless Coalition, to further enlighten council as to what the real grievances are, what, down in the trenches, what's really going on, I think that would help, go a long way into getting everybody to wrap their minds around this. So, I don't know if that's something Kyle could do, or somebody from your group could do, but I think the council itself would benefit greatly from it. Don't you?
Yeah, sure, yeah. I
So,
agree.
yeah, so,
And they'd be willing to do it.
well, good. So if we could put that on a future work session and get them to come and give us that presentation like
I mean,
Amber
I
was
wouldn't
asking
wanna
for.
approve any of this stuff until I've had.
Oh, of course, of course. Well, it's gonna take him, I would assume, quite a while to get something done anyway. But in the meantime, if you could get somebody here to speak to us.
Yeah, and Mr. Mayor, I'm feeling some urgency because without some level of direction as it relates to particularly dealing with campsites that, in my opinion, do pose public health.
And we're coming into those months now.
Absolutely.
Well, you're the one in charge of the agenda, so the quicker you get somebody in here, the quicker it'll move. I'm just being
But
honest.
I will tell you though, from the ordinance standpoint, that is definitely a heavier lift and will require further discussion. I completely agree.
Okay, well, if you could set that up on a work session for us in a relatively near future.
Yes,
I know
sir.
we have budgets coming and everything else, but I would think 30 or 45 minutes would probably go a long way for this council.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, let's move on to 1 cent applications. We are rocking this schedule right now. So,
Mr. Mayor, the opportunity tonight to discuss 1 cent applications is really meant to be dedicated to process, not to individual application merit and those kinds of things. So you've probably noticed.
Be your own.
How much time we got allotted?
400 pages in there.
I'll tell you what, I could break this down in 3 minutes if you'd like me to.
Oh, heck, yeah.
Because we discussed this in leadership. So the application process, in a nutshell, we have $5.8 million worth of ask. We only have $2.25 million worth of money. So what we talked about in leadership, with your blessing, in the application process, which there are 404 pages for the 35 applicants, we are going to ask our city clerk to go through those, because there is a section in there that explains what they would use the money for. We're gonna have her pull that out of the 35 applications, get that to us so that we can review it. We can find out which ones actually fit within our council goals and which ones don't, thereby probably chopping that list in half almost immediately. And then at that point, we could start rating them. And if we have any questions whatsoever, we can invite those groups to come in and make a presentation to us, and just kind of figure out where we're at. And if that's kind of it in a nutshell, really. If that's okay with you guys, I think if we have 35 applications, first thing I think we need to do is, what are they going to use the money for? I think that's imperative for us. Secondly, then you can ask yourself, as you're reviewing them, how does that fit into our council goals? And thereby eliminating probably quite a few of them. And then when we break down our list, see where we're at, how much money we have. We may be able to take care of it that way, or we may have to invite a few in for some explanations or a 5-minute presentation on, hey, we're so-and-so, this is what we want to use our money for. For instance, I'll tell you, one of the applications that came in late that will not be considered was Casper Speedway was asking for lights at the Speedway. And just to be 100% honest with you, that doesn't fit within our council goals. So that would be one of the ones that would be, we would probably have dove right over top of that and went on to the, to the next one, for instance. Because lighting at the racetrack isn't our council goal. Our council goals are mental health and substance abuse, I believe, is what we set. So go ahead.
Can you clarify what you're suggesting that the clerk would do?
Yeah, so in their application, there was a question in the application
Yeah.
that said, what would you use the funds for?
And there was one that said, how does this relate to council goals? So I
Well,
feel like that should be.
I don't know that
included
they may not know exactly what our goals are specifically. Some of them did, yeah, but some of them may not know. So for me, I would rather know, I just want that question from that one that says, what would you use this money for? Bam, we can review that. We're gonna know if it falls within our council goals or not. It's just a suggestion, it's not the way we have to do it. But if we, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I would find that very helpful. I thought we were talking about the merits of the applications tonight, so I already did that. So-
I've already done it too. I've gone through the whole thing, but.
Oh, good for
When
you
I have
guys.
notes, I
But
pulled
yes.
out all those paragraphs and stuff.
So if you were to, the two of you, just as a question, if you were to run back through your mind and you've already done all that, where did you end up at like at a number?
Got it down to $3.89 million.
3.89. So see, that's kind of what I figured. I figured we'd shave off about a third. So then what we could do as a council is say, have a roundtable discussion and start rating them, and then kind of figure out how it fits, or even cut some so we can give some money to some or some to another. And if that didn't work, then we could invite them in for a 5-minute presentation of some of the ones that we thought were on the cusp, and so they could explain to us maybe a little further how that fit in, to maybe what we're doing. So initially, I guess, and I'm glad you two did your homework. I apologize I did not, and it doesn't sound like anybody else did. So I would like to get those synopsises of each one of them, what it is, just that specific question, to give us a better idea of what they would be using the money for. Then I could, for myself, like you did, rate how that fits into our council goals, and then just start rating them from there, if that works for everybody else. Go ahead, sir.
Fleur, were you gonna put it in a spreadsheet for us to calculate?
She's just now hearing about it.
Yeah. I just know in years past, Fleur's put him in here so we can scale them and do all that stuff, and then say how much we want to give
there it is.
them.
You already
It's
did it?
really, yeah, she's really.
It's better than mine.
Wait, what?
That should have been in your packets. If you didn't get
I did
one-
not see that in my packet.
I didn't
Okay.
have it.
Go
Do you
ahead.
have
Yes,
them?
please.
Your Honor, counselors. Yeah, so I was just gonna present it tonight. Our city attorney went through them and to say whether they should be or could be legally funded, I should say. So he went through that and we were going to present that tonight and then send you all a copy so that based on what you decided the process was gonna be, you could go through applications with this. It has a very short summary of what they're asking for, and then you could compare that to your council goals and the statements they made as to whether it went to the council goals or not, which is in the applications, and then vote. And so this was the spreadsheet I prepared, and we'll send you all based on whatever.
Okay, if you would do me a favor and make copies of those and put them in everybody's mailbox so they have a hard copy of it, so that when they go to do their work, especially myself, we can start ranking on those, that would be awesome.
I'd be happy to provide hard copies. In the
Please.
past, we've done it so that it adds it all up for you, so you can see how much you're doing. So I'll send it out by Excel as well.
Okay, very good. Amber?
Will you add a column, I found it helpful to analyze the total annual operating budget in relationship to how much money they were asking for from us.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Say they
So
get
what's the
Amber
total budget?
Yeah, so they're asking for
Annual operating
100,000, but their annual operating
Request
budget's only
proportion of the-
100,000, we know we got
to
it,
their operating, okay.
right?
There were a few in there that were basically asking for the
Their
entire-
operational budget.
Their whole entire
of
operation.
the operating budget, and that's something we should know.
That'd be great to know. Sir? I'll get you.
So I have a couple questions.
Go ahead.
Just kind of the overall process. Is there a staff review per se of the applications before council, just to kind of make a recommendation, or?
Mr. Mayor, Counselor, this vetting process has taken a variety of forms
Sure,
over the
sure.
years. I would be reluctant to put staff in the position of saying whether or not it meets council goals. I
Sure.
think that's kind of a subjective review with each individual counselor.
Agreed.
However, we have gone through the process of vetting the legality of each of the applications at a minimum. And you would see that designated on your spreadsheet that Fleur and Eric have.
And if you look at the spreadsheet where it says, can they be funded legally, and it says yes, that doesn't mean it's in our council goals. It just means legally we could fund them if we
They
wanted to.
meet the intent of the statute.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Hang on
So-
1 second, Lisa.
Go ahead. So second question, just real quick is, yeah, that was kind of is the alignment between the council goals and the state statute. So in other words, you could have something that meets the state statute that doesn't meet goal or doesn't align with council goals and vice versa.
Absolutely.
And so how, I guess my question is, how did the applicants, do they know where to find the council goals or how?
Well, some of them did, obviously.
They're in the application, yeah.
So, really?
Was it part of the application, Fleur?
Your Honor, councilors,
Go
yes,
ahead.
it was.
It was part of the
There was a
application?
sheet that had it, and so it said, please go to this tab.
Okay,
That
gotcha.
had all of your council goals, and then
Yeah.
the next question was
Okay.
what it meant.
So I do find it odd when it says they have our council goals right in front of them, but as their thing, they said we're gonna use it for operational money. I find that odd, but anyway, Kyle's next, and then Amber. Or Kyle and then Lisa, excuse me.
Thanks. I'm stoked to see that you already put this together, Floor. And I don't want to give you more homework. I wonder if this is something that, if it's easily retrievable, would love to see it. If it's going to require 10 hours of labor, I don't know if the juice is worth the squeeze. But as I was reading through it, I know some of these applicants have applied over multiple cycles. I would be curious to know each of these entities over the lifetime of 1 cent, how much they've received. You know, if one entity's received over $1 million in 1 cent and one has got a $20,000 application, never applied before, that to me should be a weighted variable. So I would just, if it's something you can easily pull, I would advocate that be included in a column. If not, you know.
If I'm not mistaken, we've done that before where we've had some where we've known who've applied for it because we've made decisions based upon that in the past as well. I remember a couple different nonprofits. And we've had those conversations where, oh, they've received 500,000, you know, and so now maybe it's this year they're not gonna receive it. But looking at new opportunities that meet our council goals, that are doing that and doing the work, I think is really critical for us, I think, to look at as we go through the process.
I agree. Lisa?
I thought when we started this process, we had said that it wasn't to go towards salaries.
We did.
And could you, like, make this smaller? Almost all of these are salaries.
Well, there's one there with said systems upgrade, as you, but you're right, there's a lot of them that say salaries, benefits.
But I thought that we had said before this whole thing that this money was not to be towards
That is correct, we did.
salaries.
We did say that.
Did we not? Was that part of?
I remember that differently.
Yeah, I do too.
Carter, what do you remember?
Mr. Mayor, I do not recall that being a filtering component.
Oh, excuse me, Lisa. What we said was we would never use it on the city level as operational money or salaries or benefits. That wasn't applied towards our.
The nonprofits.
Correct, that was for us specifically. Ours is for infrastructure and projects, yeah. So, yeah. Go ahead,
I think
Amber.
part of the rationale for that is that in some cases, we can better meet our operational goals by helping fund, or our council goals by helping fund some of these operations that are, and so they may need a position to create a new program that solves a problem that we're trying to solve. So
Right.
I don't think that we should, it's not just capital expenditures that are needed to go towards our council goals. That's what we do.
And keep in mind, one of our goals is mental health.
Correct.
And
That's
so
gonna
if
be
they're gonna
hard.
use salaries for counselors to staff them, so yeah, that makes perfect sense.
And that's what I was gonna say, I mean, if we look at, when you look at general operating, the flexibility that comes with general operating and being able to do that for these organizations is huge.
Yep.
For them to utilize it for what they need to, and if you talk to these nonprofits, a lot of them have grants that they do deal with that are really restricted, federal and state grants. And those restrictions kind of box them in, but if you look at some type of a general operating, they can take that and they can do a lot of really, really good stuff.
Is there a way for us to find out if any of the money they're asking for is money they're using to acquire more money? In other words, to go after more grants or?
Mr. Mayor, I would say that is a typical strategy with regard to a number of these. And I would probably suggest as well, I'm kind of looking at Fleur to make sure I don't get a disconcerting look, that if that was a part of their ask, you would see it in this column D.
Okay, because for me personally, when we're giving that money out, if I know that 100,000 we're gonna give them could turn into 500,000, that gives it more value for me.
Yeah.
So,
There were 4 or 5 of them that indicated
okay,
that.
good, all right, good. Well, like I said, I haven't seen this yet, so I will look at it, but.
No problem.
Are there any other questions then? Floor will get us this with the additional information that we've asked for. And then I'm assuming we're gonna plan a work session where we are literally gonna go through these.
And that is the heart of what we're asking tonight. How would you like the 25th, which is the vetting night, to operate? And that's really what we need to know.
Here's the caveat, if we're gonna do it on the 25th, because this can take a lot of time, so I'm gonna ask you folks to go home and do your homework so that we come to the table kind of with an idea of where we already wanna be, so that we're not starting at ground zero and turning it into a 10-hour night. So if we do our homework beforehand and you go through these and you start ranking and doing some ranking 1 through whatever until you hit that 2.25 million, and if there's still some underneath it that you feel need to be done, maybe in your mind go back and say, well, we could, instead of giving them 200, we can do 150 here so that we can help this person too. If you can have that homework done on the 25th, that would be extremely helpful for us to facilitate this in a timely manner, if that's fair.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think so, and I like the approach of just roundtabling it. I don't think we need to plan to have folks come and present. At least for me, going through these, I don't know that there's anybody who I was like, you need to appear here and convince me of something. Either I was convinced or I wasn't.
Okay, the only reason I had that thought was I thought if we get down to the bottom and there's maybe a group of 5 and we're just maybe not explanatory enough of what they're doing, like there's one that says construction fees, okay, what are you building for $400,000? And it's on the cusp, we may have them come and say, hey, you know, we see you're asked for 400,000, what are you building? Would 150 get you where you need to be? You know, it was just a thought I had, but we certainly don't have to do that by any stretch, so, sir?
Yeah, to that point of just having some questions that I was looking to have answered, I don't necessarily think we need to have every single person in front of us to go through their application, but I did have questions, and I don't know if this is the appropriate venue, maybe it's another time, but for instance, like the salary, there was a sheet in each application that gave salary for every employee. What sort of requirement are they required to provide all salaries? I noticed a lot of them left their executive directors out of those reports and stuff, and so I feel like for transparency's sake, that needs to be in there. I don't know if it's a requirement of the application, but that was just something I noticed. One of the applicants, they're the only applicant that does not have a facility within the city of Casper. They're actually in another municipality, and so I don't know, to receive 1 cent funding, is it a requirement you have to be in the city of Casper?
It's a requirement if you're serving people that live within the city of Casper.
Yeah, so in case in point, Self-Help's had that conversation before with me. And we've had this conversation. Self-Help serves the city of Casper, even though they're located in Evansville, and they've always been, they've had funding for years from the 1 cent funding.
The financial salary, or, you know,
Is that required? It is? So the ones that are,
well, then I feel like some of those applications were not complete.
okay, well, so do we go back and ask them to complete their application, or do we deny them because they didn't turn in an incomplete application?
Mr. Mayor, I think those are the kinds of decision criteria you need to feel comfortable with as it relates to your individual rankings of these applications. You're past your deadline. They've submitted the information. That will not be the only blank you see in a number of these applications, by the way. And I would say, if you extend the deadline, so to speak, by requesting, completing information, I think you open up a bit of a Pandora's box for.
Well, with that said, I will tell you, this application is very self-explanatory. And in my opinion, just like we had one turn an application in today that we said, I'm sorry, we're not going to consider it, you are past the deadline. If we have an application that's incomplete, it should not be considered, in my opinion. But that is up to the council to decide. So I guess I'm going to ask you for a decision. Are incomplete, it's either we deny them based on an incomplete application, or we have to extend the deadline, which opens up a can of worms like you wouldn't believe, and you're going to have a whole plethora of new applications coming in the door. Sir.
Fleur, do you know how many people were blanked? I didn't go through it all. Do we know if there's a lot that did?
I don't know off the top of my head the exact number. There were a few.
Like I noticed some weren't blank completely, there were just select positions that were omitted, so.
They did include salaries and stuff, but some of them combined them and some of them didn't And that might not have been on purpose, they might have just combined all the salaries, some of them just left out there.
Or it may have been on purpose.
And some of them, I think, were confused, and so they put the salaries that would go specifically for the program they were requesting, but not for their total operation.
Okay, gotcha.
And there will be other blanks. I mean, it's just inevitable that there will be other questions that aren't answered for whatever reason.
So we need
A whole variety of
we need to make a decision on that. I mean, we've got $6 million worth of asks for
Can I say
$2 million. Yes, please.
typically in the grant process, right? I mean, if you're don't have a complete application or you don't, that's part of the vetting
That's right.
You're supposed to be competent enough
There's
to
two,
do
there's
it.
two theories behind it. There's a trust-based philosophy where the conversation is, you go to them and you have the conversation to say, hey, what's going on here? We need to know this. So that's one way. Or you can be stringent and be like, you missed the deadline, you didn't put it in there, sorry, you lose out. So you can look at both those options on how you do it. I would tend to be, I know it's a little bit more work on our side of it, in the work that I do in my grant work, we take the opportunity to sit down and talk with them first before we just cut, or we just say we're gonna be, I think it's up to the council to decide which way they wanna go.
And that's where we're at. We need to make a decision. And I can tell you on a state level, if you turn in an incomplete grant to SLIP or anybody else, you're out, period. There's no calling you saying, hey, you missed line 13.
I think that's up to the council to decide which way they wanna go.
I think that, I think that's for some of these, they were a little sparse on some like budget information because they're very small organizations and don't have a lot of meat to put in there, and I'm a little more comfortable considering those. For me, it was kind of clear. There were some that were like glaring omissions, and so I would just suggest that when we do our homework, that if you've got some that are like, this is a major omission, like I don't feel comfortable funding it, put it to the bottom of the pile, and we can discuss those when we come together, like this is.
I like that too.
And it's not hard and fast, but there's some, like, what is an incomplete application? I feel like having gone through all of these, it's a little more ambiguous than just like a clear yes or no on some of them. Some of them it's clear to me, and some of them it's like, oh, well, maybe that is enough information for me to go on.
It's kind of.
I have, it's kind of for me too, looking over them, and I mean, I take this into, maybe I'm too nice, but I look at it and I always think I don't apply for certain ones. I always try to root for the underdog, and I don't just, I'm not greedy in that sense. So when I look at, through my eyes and my perspective, when I look at the list of different things and I'm seeing different businesses who are constantly already being funded very well, I tend to go to the underdog and just give them a lift up.
That's a slim idea.
You know what I mean, though? But that's typically,
Well, that's partly why I wanted the operating budgets. Like if you're
Right.
if you're operating with a huge operating budget that you're good.
Well, not always necessarily, because I
Not
look at the
always,
city, of Casper when it comes to SLIB money, and they're like, well, they're bigger, so they've got a lot more money to deal with. Well, we're also servicing 80,000 people with our water and sewer, so just because they're bigger doesn't mean their needs aren't just as prevalent as somebody that's smaller. So keep that in mind, but one second, I would like to take your idea, because I think it's a fantastic one, and as we're working through these, to just take note of the ones that are glaringly omitting things, and maybe move them to the bottom of your list, and we can discuss those on the 25th and decide at that time what we'd like to do with them. If everybody's okay with that, did you want to add something, Kyle?
No, I would just say I totally agree with that.
Yeah, and I do too. So is everybody okay with that ideology then?
Yeah.
Lisa, Jenna, you're okay with that? Okay, so let's do our homework before the 25th, kind of do a ranking system, and keep in mind, it is not going to do us any good for you to come to that meeting with $3.8 million worth of asks when we only have $2.25 million. So you've really got to do your homework here and get it down to where it needs to be, and then we're going to have to all come together. And by the time we all come together, we're still going to have $4 million that we have to try to figure out how to get down to $2.25, because there is no more money. That's all there is. So I would ask you to come to the table with no more than $2.25 worth of asks, and we will, or I think it's $2,250,000.
2.25.
Yeah, 2.25.
Yeah.
So if you can bring your homework within those guidelines when we sit down together, I think it'll make the process, it's still not gonna be easy, because we're gonna, what may be my number one might be your number 12 and vice versa. And so now we got to try to figure out how this is all going to mesh. So go
And we
ahead.
don't have to award them their entire amount.
Oh, no.
Absolutely not. You do not. And that is something that we will end up probably hashing out as a group together. That's why I was thinking maybe there's one or two that we would want in front of us to say, I would like the SLIB does and say, I see you're asking for 400 to build a facility. Is this multiple facilities? Could we do 150 this year? Would that help you? Could you still complete your project? Sometimes there's questions like that you can ask and they'll be like, well, yeah, we wouldn't be able to do the second building, but that would help us get our first one done. And then we can worry about next year to maybe, and we just cut 250,000 just like that. But without them in front of you and knowing the answer to those questions, I don't know how you answer them. So we're going to have to try to tackle this without doing that part of it. So just be mindful, I guess, when you do your own cutting, that maybe you have some inside information that you could share with the group and say, here's why I think they can get away with half or whatever. So. But there are other groups, so if they need 400 and it's a 400 or nothing, and we're only giving them 200, it's not gonna do them a bit of good. They're gonna say, well, we can't do anything with 200 because it's an all or
I
nothing
don't
project.
think any nonprofit would say that.
It just depends on what the project is. If it's construction and building, it may be, this is what the project costs to do. And, they're probably not gonna turn down the 200,000, but then are they not fulfilling the obligation of what they applied for? So I don't know. So just try to be mindful when we go through this stuff, and on the 25th, let's all come together with 2.25 in each one of our hands and see if we can make it all mesh.
There's some good applicants in there.
There are some very good ones, and it's just a shame. It reminds me of being down there on the state when they gave us that extra 2 million, and that was really difficult for them to do. Every project that comes to them is worthy in its own right, but we just don't have the money, unless we want to pull it from streets or whatever. I just did that for Kyle. So anyway, all right, let's move on. Okay, see you on the 25th with your stuff in hand for that. Let's move on to the agenda review, and we are right on time, sir. I'm 2 minutes early, actually.
It's amazing. Thank you. Yes, I'm very impressed. And frankly.
Taking notes?
Me? I'm taking notes.
Mr. Mayor, as far as I'm concerned, that ends the urgent issues as far as staff is concerned. Yes, we could talk more about grid addendum items on the back page and the rest of the grid and so on. But in the interest of time and so on, I'm happy to defer.
We do have, there's nothing on the agenda review that we need to go over. We could run through the grid of addendum. I mean, we can take 5 minutes. We're doing really well on time. So if you wanted to run through that for 5 minutes, because your agenda review and your grid addendum are all kind of the same thing, really. So we could just knock them both out in about 5 minutes and really be done and I feel better about it.
Mr. Mayor, to that end, the only page that I'm really referring to on the grid then would be your very back page entitled the future agenda items. You can see that, this page kind of grows and shrinks over time as we get items docketed and so on. And there's a variety of items that, while on the future agenda page, haven't necessarily risen to the level of immediacy, if you will, and tends to get put off and bumped for other higher priority concerns. And so you can see the list of items that remain. We still have some items on here that are docketed, so to speak, even though you don't see them in the body of the grid document yet. And so we'd be open to any questions you might have or other priority that you want to place on any of these items to move us forward.
One question, if I may.
Yes.
I need permission from the council to sign the opioid MOU. We got our second settlement, and I need permission from the council to be able to sign the MOU for us to stay on that and continue to receive those monies. Eric, if you could explain it in a nutshell just a little further.
Yes, certainly, Mayor, Councilors. So there's been a second settlement with the retailers under the opioid settlement kind of process. Just in the last week, I received a proposed MOU between the city and the state. They need it back by the 18th. Of course, we don't meet again until the 18th, so my request would be to allow the mayor to execute that. We'll ratify it on the 18th so I can get this submitted to Cheyenne. It's essentially the same format, same process as the first one with the pharmaceutical manufacturers and distributors. So I think it's a win-win for the city.
So is everybody okay if I sign that and we bring that on the 18th?
Yep.
Okay, and then, and that'll make that opioid funding discussion even more prevalent because we will now have 2 rounds of money, matching funds from the county as well, and we need to get moving on that and get a program put in place to start helping those people now that we have the actual money in hand, so. Other than that, any other questions or anything concerning the back grid? No? All right, well, everybody go enjoy yourself tonight. Mr. Kathy, I believe, is enjoying Greece. Lucky dog. And by the way, he had a horrible accident right before he left.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I don't think he let everybody know, but he was pulling that big 3-axle trailer he bought to haul his Corvette in from Cheyenne, and the wind took the trailer, and right down the interstate it went and destroyed a lot of his pickup too. He was fine, came out okay. So I think the truck's in the body shop while he's in Greece. So when he comes home, he'll probably forget it ever happened. But, sir.
Mayor, we have a council around the table.
Oh, yes, please, Mr. Bond, council around the table. Do you have anything tonight?
Not much, other than I just want to say, you described the people coming up from the river naked, and you described the 70s, we decided. Through the 70s.
Michael, I don't want to hear about your high school days. That's off limits.
It's college.
I'm just kidding. Brandy? Nothing? Amber?
I would just like to invite folks out tomorrow evening at Kelly Walsh High School. The University of Wyoming Symphony Orchestra is here. It's my alma mater. Played with that group for all 4 years of college. So,
Nice.
they do a tour once a year, I think, around the state. It's a great group. So check that out. I think it's 7 or 7:30 tomorrow.
Free, too.
In their
Free, yeah.
gymnasium?
In their auditorium.
Nice.
Yeah. That's all.
Very cool.
Tomorrow night, yep.
Lisa?
Just a couple things. So I attended the DOJ meeting this morning, and then kudos to the city for the snow removal. Andrew's not here. But a side note about the storm. I truly believe that we should not be asking city employees to come here when it has been told by everybody, stay home, it's not safe, don't go outside. And I don't think that we should be dictating to employees that they should have to come here and risk their safety for a meeting. And so I'd like to see how we can make that, because I feel like we could have had that all online. I didn't feel comfortable that everybody was here. And then there was a lot of constituents that were calling me and saying that, that was ridiculous, and they felt like we, the city council, intentionally put the city employees' lives at risk. And that's the way it looked because people were here. But it was very unsafe Tuesday night. And so I do think that maybe that's something that we should look at of, your IT guy could maybe operate it from home or whatever, or to just narrow down the amount of people that were here. Because when it's a safety and health issue, it was a problem. And if you got in an accident, what would have happened? Fleur has babies at home. The whole list goes on. So I just think that we really need to look at that and try to be a little bit more mindful about our own safety as well as others.
Jenna?
Nothing.
Kyle?
Thanks, Bruce.
Certainly.
I'll take advantage of us being ahead of the agenda. Now, just a couple things. I had the chamber luncheon last Thursday. Wanted to thank all of our local legislators for attending and participating in the panel. I did get the opportunity to ask Representative Ward about any assistance we might expect from our legislature on the issue of rising homelessness, such as the issue of Greyhound therapy or the shuttling of homeless individuals around our state. Unfortunately, the only solution she was able to offer at that time was securing the border with Mexico. But I'm hopeful we can explore other potential solutions in the near future. DDA announced their 5150 lineup. The festival is August 19th. Performances, Band Name Sue, Gabriel the Bull, CW and 20 Hands High, Craig Campbell. Put it on your calendar. I saw Lime Scooter was approaching City of Laramie to bring more scooters to their community. I was curious if we've had Lime reach out to us at all. So yeah, I was just curious if we had other vendors reaching out to us for scooters. 'Tis the season. I think last year we had 200, so just something I want us to continually monitor and keep a part of discussion. And then lastly, there's a neighborhood meeting this Thursday for the Westridge Circle LAD assessment. So I know folks had some questions about that. So if you have any questions, please go to that public meeting Thursday and get those answered. That's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Vice Mayor?
I'll be real brief. Homelessness is a complicated issue, and I think we are not going to get it solved in tonight's meeting. We're not going to get it solved in committee works. It's a systemic issue that is pervasive, and we're not going to arrest our way out of it. We're not going to do any of those things that are that it's why it's there, why Casper's been a hub for a long time. We have an incredible amount of great nonprofits that are working incredibly hard to address that issue and to try to be partners within that issue. And I think the city can be a part of that component of addressing that. I don't think the city and the government can address it fully and create an opportunity for us to solve it as a government. I just don't think that that's even possible. But I think we have to partner together. I think we have to partner as governmental agencies, nonprofits, and a community to address that issue. And there's a level of compassion behind it. There is a incredible amount of mental health issues behind homelessness if you look at statistics, and an incredible amount of substance abuse disorders based around homelessness. Small percentage of those that choose to be homeless. Incredibly small percentage of those that choose. A lot of it is substance abuse and mental health disorders. We have a long road to go and some issues to deal with, and I look forward to fighting that.
Amen. Anything else, sir?
Oh, that's it.
All right, well, thank you. The only thing I have is, and I just want to respond to Lisa real quick. The decision to shut down the city or stay running falls on the mayor. Last time it snowed real bad, I chose to stay open while the school shut down and the county shut down. All the main arteries were open, and we seemed to do okay with minimal impact. This last time, it was a hellacious storm, and I get it. But we allowed anybody that wanted to stay home, and we shut down on Wednesday. I know Jenna and Lisa and I did come down here, and the roads were fine. In fact, I picked Jenna up at her house because she couldn't get out of her garage. But the actual main roads, everything was open. I didn't have any problems getting here. So if anybody ever feels unsafe or anything like that, you are more than willing to call me or the city manager, and you will always be excused. We don't ever want anyone to ever feel like they're being put in danger or asked to work in an unsafe way in any way. I would never do that to anyone. And my idea of what may be bad is probably completely different from somebody else's. So what I would ask you is when decisions like that are being made, if you are uncomfortable at any time, please contact your direct supervisor. If you are not happy with the answer you get from them, you can call the city manager. And if you are not happy with that, then you can call the mayor and we will address it and it will be handled. So please don't ever feel like you ever have to do anything unsafe when you are a ward of the city, because we don't ever want anybody to ever feel that way or be stuck in a position like that. That's not what we're about. So with that said, have a wonderful evening. Those of you that are going to Journey, please enjoy. And we'll see you next Tuesday for our regularly scheduled council meeting. Work session, I believe, will be at 5:30. Right? Pre-meeting, yep. Okay. Have a great night.
Thanks, everybody.
You say make good choices at the
I can't afford to go to the concert. It's like $140 for a ticket, man.
How much were they?
Hey, Jen,
Those tickets were expensive.
are you running?
Are you going? Oh, I bought mine early. It was only $65.
Yeah, I did find
Really? Yeah. And now somebody said, Jackie Brown said they were gonna go, but she's like, I'm not paying $200 for a ticket. I'm like,